Pull yourself up a chair and join us at the Energy Roundtable.
Welcome to the Energy Roundtable, where Lisa and I, co-hosts of the Energy Radio podcast, get together to talk about the headlines from the week in news and debate their merits and their impact and their value. Lisa, welcome.
Thanks, Matt. How are you doing this Friday?
I'm doing well, and how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good. Let's jump right in. My first article is from the Los Angeles Times. And the headline is California just hit 95% renewable energy. Will other states come along for the ride? ? And the article has this great infamous duck curve for those who are in the industry. This curve that looks like a duck. I'm not sure if it walks or talks like a duck, but it certainly looks like a duck with the back and and anyways, it shows that 95% of the fleet, or 95% of the energy, I guess it probably was renewables. And so that's, there's a lot of excitement around that. So we've seen some struggles, but kind of a good news story. What are your thoughts, Lisa?
Yeah, I'm actually impressed by the number. I had no idea. I mean, I knew that they were on the forefront of all this, but 95% is a pretty big number. And it's just amazing how much things have changed. Like when I was in the emissions control space, I remember we were getting a California Air Resource Board verification, I guess we'd call it. And part of the reason we were doing that was so that we could sell our product into California and clean up diesel emissions, because there were a lot of mobile pieces of diesel equipment that were running around, and they were very stringent at that point. But just to think of, I mean, I'm sure every piece of equipment there is outfitted now with emissions control. But just to think of what they've done on a statewide scale to, implement renewables that quickly, that's interesting.
Yeah, I think there's some the whole grid reliability piece is is the kind of the caveat to all this, right? When the sun goes down or goes behind a cloud or whatever, how does that impact the market? How do you provide resiliency? Mm-hmm. We're not too far removed from Texas and its issues. I don't think you're going to have an ice storm in California anytime soon, but you never know. Never know. Climate change is going in funny directions. So grid stability is going to be the challenge, but it's certainly, to your point, we've come a long way. So, good news story. How do we make it a holistic story that provides both the resiliency and the renewable energy footprint? So, yeah, cool story nonetheless.
So I'll talk. I was actually going to talk about a different article first, but just because we were talking about renewable energy in California, this is maybe a good segue into this one. So this one it's an old article, but there is kind of a new news piece to it. So it's from the Ontario Clean Air Alliance. The article itself was dated May 20th, 2020. And its title is, "It's Time to Phase Out Ontario's Gas-Fired Power Plants to Help Protect Our Climate." The reason that I say that it's kind of an old and a new kind of article is because the Ontario Energy Association released a report on April the 14th. It was produced by Power Advisory, apparently, and it was titled, I think, "Phasing Out Ontario's Gas-Fired Power Plants." And really what it's talking about is the fact that we've gone from coal to nuclear. Now there's a lot of nuclear refurbishments are required in Ontario. And so there's going to be a lot of gas-fired generation that's going to be required. And that's not necessarily in simple or combined cycle mode, right? Like a lot of those plants are operating in simple cycle mode. So really from an overall efficiency perspective, they're not great. So then there's some interesting numbers. They say that by 2030, our greenhouse gas emissions will increase by 300%. And by 2040, by 500% if we keep going on this path. And then we're losing roughly 40% of the pollution reduction benefits achieved by phasing out the coal-fired generation. So then they have a whole bunch of kind of ideas in terms of, bringing in a hydro line to Ottawa so that we can import electricity from Quebec. They talk about, made in Ontario solar and wind. To get the cost down below what our current cost of nuclear electricity is at, which is about 9.6 cents per kilowatt hour in 2021. What was interesting to me, though, was that 22 municipalities have now passed resolutions requesting the government of Ontario to phase out our gas-fired power plants. I'll just name a few. I'm not going to name all of them, but Kitchener, Halton Hills, Hamilton, Burlington, St. Catharines, Town of Cobourg, Guelph, Waterloo, Kingston. I was just kind of blown away by that. I don't really know what to think of it, because there isn't. So in terms of thumbs up or thumbs down, this is a really hard thing for us to answer as a province, right? Like you're phasing out nuclear generation. They haven't really come up with a plan to replace that with renewables. So what's that going to look like? How is this all going to unfold in the next year or two? It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm thumbs down on this. I'm sure I fall prey to it as well. But I mean, it's easy to stand back as a municipality who, in most cases, isn't charged with grid reliability, and stand back and throw rocks and say we got to clean our grid. And I'm all for bottom up pressure, but I think we need to broaden the discussion and talk about a lot of the ancillary benefits, as we call them, that these assets provide. And I'm not naive to know that. To say that nobody else can provide that. Obviously, there's other technologies that can provide same ancillary benefits, but are they there? Is the infrastructure there? Is the market structures there? So, as I've said on this before, we need the extremes to move the middle. So we need this extreme point. Is a Ford government in Ontario, is the next government, are any of them in a position to do this in the next 5 years? No, they're not. The nuclear assets need to be refurbished, and so we're going to have to, but is it the trajectory we should trend towards? Yeah, of course it is, but is it something that we're going to get to, by 2030? Probably not, because it's just they provide too much strength and resiliency in the market.
Yeah, and I think that I'm hoping that the ISO will start to look at distributed energy resources a little bit more, just to kind of start to bridge this gap a little bit, in the sense that there's a whole bunch of different technologies that are sitting behind the meter. And if they could use that, and that would benefit them from an overall emissions perspective, at a grid level, that could potentially resolve some of what's going on here as well.
You raise a good point. Like, how do we, it's one thing to have, from a macro, all of Ontario or all of the surrounding areas have that, but then the local power, how do we get that resiliency if there is a massive ice storm again and it affects transmission lines? How can we get that? It's one thing to have the resiliency at the transmission level. Can we also get it at the distribution level? And that's where microgrids and things of that nature come in.
Yep.
So the next headline I wanted to talk about, and I'm not necessarily, I'm sure it shows up a lot, is, I don't have a specific headline, but is this President Biden address to the joint sessions of Congress earlier this week, I think on Tuesday evening. So I think on the 27th or 28th of April. In any case, so, first of all, it's the first time that the president is sitting in front of both a female Speaker of the House and a female Vice President. So that's kind of cool. But also he really, call it, vision, call it rhetoric, or call it somewhere in between, but a lot of conversation on clean energy, a lot of moving the needle around, and some specifics and some, but really casting a vision. And what I liked about it was a vision around not just, pie in the sky ideas and this sort of, but really two things. One is, pitching it in the sphere of job creation and pushing jobs. I think that's exciting. And then I think we also, Simon Sinek writes a book called The Infinite Game, which is talking about how all of us need, one of the tenets that he has is that in industry and in business and in whatever we do, to be a better version of ourselves, we need a what does he call it? He calls it like a credible enemy or some kind of foe that we have to be. So the space race to the moon, right? The Americans had the Russians that's there. And so Joe Biden is really pitting the Americans, North America, against China in terms of this climate race. So I think he laid down the gauntlet. I know America is very polarized and that will play itself out, but kind of an interesting and exciting somebody with that pulpit to really push for it. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you followed any of it, if you have any thoughts on it or anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if there's any U.S. president that is going to get as close as possible to achieving this very quickly, I think it actually could be Biden. There's a lot of people backing him on this. And in addition to that, I think he's kind of just stepped in at the right time, right? Like, again, we're sort of in the middle of this energy transition, so it'll be exciting to see how much change he's actually able to make.
Yeah, I think in the U.S. system, there's a bit more federal regulation around energy than there is here in Canada. So I think that he has that going for him, and that they're coming out of COVID. Let's see if they can really create some jobs. He's got all three houses. He's got the Senate and the House of Republicans, and of course the White House. So let's see.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, speaking about jobs, it's funny because you're just giving me the perfect segues every time. This is actually from yesterday, this article. So this is April the 29th. So the ISO invests in projects that increase Indigenous participation in Ontario's energy sector. And it looks like the ISO is going to be providing $7.1 million in funding to 61 participants that will support energy planning, renewable generation, and energy efficiency measures. And I love the story, just because there's so much intent there to transform these types of, the Indigenous communities who historically I think has been a little overlooked. Although the ISO actually, I think since its inception with this particular program in 2009, I found out, have provided $44.8 million in funding to 164 unique Indigenous communities and organizations. So that I think is great. But I think the big news story here is it's going to just spur economic development and the job creation and everything else that's just great for those communities. So I think that's a good news story.
Yeah, me too. I'm thumbs up on this, and anytime we can drive economic development, and I mean energy reliability and reliance on diesel is often a challenge in Indigenous communities, and so to get to get away from that and anything we can do around biomass or hydrogen, some pretty exciting things there. So it'll be I hope it, and the ISO has been pretty good about rolling out programs and being able to, get some real traction around programs like this. So I think, they put a lot of thought into it, and I'm sure they've done a lot of stakeholder, and we know they're very good at that. So, it'll be interesting to see what comes of this, but it's another good news story for sure in the right direction.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we've reached the face-off segment of our roundtable, and we'll bring our man behind the glass in front of the glass. Mark Charbonneau, welcome to Energy Roundtable.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
We can hear you.
Fantastic. Okay, so face off, where we pit you two against each other and pros and cons of certain subjects. Today's subject is solar power, and one of you will be, pro solar power, one of you will be con solar power. And I have my recorder.
Right on.
There's the moose side.
I love it.
And today we'll let Matt call heads or tails. What would you like?
All right. I would like heads.
Okay, here we go. And it's tails. So Lisa, what would you like, pro or con?
Oh my, I could take this both ways. I'll do pros.
Okay. And I guess you can decide who starts if you've got the coin flip too. So
this is as complicated as the coin flip at an NFL game, right? You got to call it. Then do you want to receive? Do you want to kick? You want to, first half, second half? This is just as complicated.
Yeah, and then you have to pick which year the coin was made.
Right. And, Well, that's when you want to wager on it, Mark. That's a bit different.
Do you want me to start, Matt, or do you want to start?
It's your selection. I lost the toss. I lost.
Okay.
That, so.
All right. So I will start. So I guess to start off, solar obviously is a proven technology. There are actually currently 47.1 gigawatts of total solar capacity installed nationwide.
Hold on. How do you know that? Like, did Mark give you insider information here?
Well, the moment I find out what the face-off is, Matt, me, I have to be prepared.
Right. Yes, that's where you and I are very different.
I do a little bit of research in advance of this. I don't know which one I'm going to take, but I prepare either way. Solar works in many climates. So contrary to popular belief, solar panels do actually work in low light situations and not just in direct sunlight. And in areas where maybe there's less light than others. So if you were to compare, for example, Alaska to, I don't know, California as an example, we can compensate in differences in light by upsizing the solar array. Solar is more affordable than ever. The pricing has dropped 89% in 10 years. That's a huge number in 10 years. I don't even know if there's any other technology that compete with that as far as a price reduction standpoint. I think it can actually benefit the entire electricity grid in situations where it's combined with other technologies. So whether it's energy storage or combined heat and power, they have a long lifespan. 25 to 30 years is the expected life expectancy usually of solar PV. There's lots of different financial support coming out as far as incentives, across North America. In a residential case, it can increase the value of your home, providing you don't move right away. That might not benefit you otherwise. And I think the other benefit that you have with solar PV that you don't necessarily get with a lot of other technologies is there's very little maintenance that's required. And at the end of the day, they're renewable, so they're going to help the climate. And more importantly, they're just going to be one of the many technologies that we can choose to make our world a better place for generations to come.
So being totally con solar power is like being totally against like koalas or panda bears. Like, so I'm going to have to take a bit more of a nuanced con approach, because I mean, there's no doubt that, harvesting, energy from the sun, I would argue that fossil fuels are also harvesting energy from the sun. It's just a longer gestation time period. But so what I'm against is the broad view that solar power is the be all and end all to everything, because there are many drawbacks, right? And particularly early on, you had a lot of high grade farmland that was being converted to run solar panels, and so that's interrupting the supply chain. I think there is a broader question around what is required from a carbon footprint to build and dispose of, particularly create the solar PV cells. So I think, do we draw the biggest the big enough control volume around the project to really get a clearer representation of the carbon impact? That's another one. And I think it isn't a fit for every environment. I think it can't stand on its own, right? Whereas CHP as a technology can run on its own. It can do everything. Yes, it has a carbon footprint, but from a reliability perspective, it can do everything. It can run at night, or it can run on a cloudy day, which solar can't do. So that that availability curve on solar is a lot worse than a gaseous fueled CHP. So there's a lot. It's not the answer to everything. Like I said, I'm pro pandas and koala bears. And, I have to be pro solar as a part of the mix, but I think it is tried to be applied too widely.
Well, I also love pandas. Pandas are one of my favorite animals. Actually, they're just so
are they your spirit animal, Mark?
They must be. They're just so chill and lazy, and they just kind of sit around. And so, not that I sit around, but I'm envious, I guess, of the pandas. That's
understood.
What I like.
I love it.
So who won?
So I got to go with Lisa on this one. She clearly was more prepared and had all of her cheat sheet available to her.
That should be no surprise to anybody.
Yeah.
I do try my best to repair. It doesn't always work out, but
so no extra points for the reference to pandas and koala bears. That didn't help me.
Well, not this time, but
okay, all right.
Although
it is pretty cloudy where I am right now, so that's a con to solar power.
Yeah, that's funny. Actually, I'm getting solar vents put on my roof as well. So I'm getting my roof done probably in a couple of weeks, and that's what this hat is. It's they make solar vents and
what does that mean, Mark?
Yeah.
It just the vent cues the fan, and it's like so that it traps the energy, and then it runs the fan in the vents.
Oh. So yeah. Okay, so now I have a question. So what happens in the middle of winter when it snows and you have snow on your roof?
I haven't actually looked into that, but I'll get back to you on that.
It's a roof vent, so it's venting out the attic space?
Correct. Well, it's vent. Yeah, exactly. So
But
anywhere
the
that
solar panel is on the roof still, like to electrically control that vent?
right
Or-
on the vent. The panels are right on the
Okay.
vent. Yeah.
Oh,
A self-contained unit. Okay.
Correct. Yeah, I'll
Cool.
send you guys a link
Which
for it.
in the winter you don't want that anyways, right? You want that heat there to act as an insulation, whereas in the
insulation
summer.
barrier, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty cool actually. So
Solar.
That's
vents.
cool.
yeah.
Nice. Cool.
Not on
Excellent.
top.
Well, thank you for another great episode of Energy Roundtable. Mark, thank you for the face-off. Lisa, thank you for being a graceful winner in this case. Until next time, we wish you all safety and lots of fun, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Have a good one.